FINÅL routines. BEK reading. Agents F Metal, Part 1. Author. Last Urni,
Agents
session
of
number
Metal,
30 min.
Part 1.
Pg.105 to 115.
Let's see.
Site, the Battle Ream.
Orny?
Recreation. Date,
Anyway.
September 30th, 24.
Okay, we're at chapter 14, page 105. Okay, let's see what's happening. Replacing a server motherboard in a zombie-like state between sleep and reality was not exactly Ian's idea of entertainment. In fact, it was only his body that felt half asleep. His mind was still on hyperactive overdrive, racing in circles around the mystery of the documents. He kicked the server's chassis. The machine showed just a black screen when powered up. "You piece of shit, boot yourself," he raged. "That's no way to treat hardware," Gwen remarked, having just arrived from her rounds back into the server room. Ian knew it was not usual for him to be this excitable. His mind had not had the chance to rest properly, leading to uncharacteristic anger. Gwen was definitely going to suspect something. However, she said nothing. Trying to control himself, Ian checked the wiring and the CPU being properly seated one more time. Then he said a prayer to the dark gods of server hardware. Finally, he pressed the power button again. This time, the self-test display appeared properly. After getting the motherboard replaced, more work awaited because of an obscure exploit possibility. All hardware and software firewalls in the building would have to be updated. It would be a moderately long day. The day was unusual in the sense that Ian and Gwen left work at the same time. When he left, usually Gwen would always be immersed in something when he left. She would stay long into the evening if there was no pressing work remaining. Apparently delighted by the company the servers kept her, they walked in silence across the company parking lot. By now 7 p.m., it was already as dark as it was going to be. There were a few cars left. Even with the weekend coming, some analysts and consultants were working a longer day than the IT department, which was a miracle in itself. Apparently to cut electricity costs, not all the lamps were lit. This left several dark areas on the ground. As they passed one of the cars, Ian heard a sound just at the threshold of his hearing. Probably the rustling of nearby bushes at the edge of the lot. Without advance warning, Gwen pushed him forcefully down to the ground next to the car. The next thing Ian registered was a muted spit from some distance away. A split second later, one of the car windows shattered. He was still rather uncomfortable, pinned down by Gwen's mass. She motioned for him to keep quiet, but making a sound was the last thing on his mind. Rather, his mind was already racing silently. Where was the attacker or attackers? Ian watched in amazement, as seemingly from nowhere a large handgun had appeared in Gwen's right hand. It glinted a silvery color under the parking lot lights. It was a Desert Eagle. He could read the engraved text on its side. It was the heaviest .50 caliber model. Right at the moment, he realized how little he actually knew of his workmate. Of course, he was glad of her hidden skills. Had it not been for her, he would surely have gotten himself shot. He would now be lying on the cold asphalt, lifeblood oozing out of him. Gwen rose into a kneeling position and fired once. The noise was deafening, and the muzzle flash was much longer than Ian could have imagined. Due to its mass, the pistol recoiled in an unusually long, soft motion. But unless she could see perfectly in the dark, it had to have been a blind shot. Out of the darkness came a stifled cry of pain. Perplexed, Ian took a closer look at Gwen, realizing that because the sight of the large gun had been so awesome, he had not paid attention to the light amplification goggles that had appeared on her face. In the very next second, several muted shots rained on the car in revenge. Gwen was forced to duck into cover. How many attackers? Though the events and revelations before had been some kind of preparation, Ian could still not fully believe this was actually happening. But as Gwen came out of cover again to loosen a few more deafening shots, he did not have any other option than to start believing. I got lucky with the first shot, but now I can't see the bastards anymore. It's just green noise. She hissed. That was very reassuring. She then took a smaller firearm from inside her jacket and handed it to Ian, who was still sprawled on the ground. You know how to use one. Do you know how to use one? Distract them and force them to move. Ian was surprised by Gwen's commanding tone. She practically assumed he could use the weapon. He did not want to disappoint, but a quick look at the pistol made some hidden block knowledge come back to him. Unlike the Desert Eagle, which was widely known thanks to movies and games, this weapon was much less glorious, but not at all less usable. In fact, it was much easier. to handle, and it would definitely kill. It was a Heckler and Koch USP 45 caliber with a threaded barrel to accept a silencer. To his surprise and horror, Ian knew precisely how to operate one. He flicked the safety off and racked the slide. As if guided by an outside force, he rolled so that he could extend his hands past the car's front bumper, while still keeping low to the ground. Then he fired several times in succession, blindly. In the direction of fire, beyond the parking lot, there was a park. He knew it was very irresponsible to shoot, for bullets could travel far and innocent people could get hurt. However, the same force that had just taken control of him told that it did not matter. Only his own survival mattered. More muted shots came in response. Ian could hear bullets whistling as they flew close by, some impacting with the ground. The last one made an uglier sound, like tearing something. He felt a hot sensation across the length of his right arm, which had been topmost when he had fired. He rolled back to the safety of the car. Had he been hit? Safe from immediate danger, Ian inspected his right arm. The leather of his jacket was torn for almost the entire length of the sleeve, but there appeared to be no wound. He had got lucky. 2 meters away, Gwen's weapon boomed twice. No more shots came. There was just a heavy silence that hung in the air, along with smell of gunpowder. Was that the end of it? Got them, Gwen said at last. There were 2. Now we must go. We don't want to be here when the cops arrive. Do you want the gun back? Ian asked, no sure of what else to say. At least that was a logical thing to ask. He was on his feet again and had mechanically put the weapon's safety back on. His conscious mind had not yet fully processed what had just happened. No, it's now yours. To further support her words, Gwen gave him 3 spare magazines. Seeing the extra ammunition jerked Ian completely back to reality. He felt weak. Gwen had just shot 2 attackers dead, who in turn had been trying to kill him, Gwen, or both. And he had helped her by handling a semi-automatic firearm quite expertly as well. He had no conscious memory of ever practicing with one. It was unbelievable, but there was just no way out. This was his reality, and he had to accept it. Gwen removed the goggles from her eyes, and they started a jog out of the parking lot, keeping to the darkness. After a few minutes, Ian could hear the wail of sirens coming from the distance, getting closer. Unanswered questions circled in his mind. Gwen had said there had been 2 attackers, but there had been no time to check the corpses. Where were they the same as in the club? Had Lucas thus been avenged already? Somehow, Ian doubted it would be that easy. He was sure the real questions and mysteries only lay ahead. He had now all the more reason to be puzzled of himself as well. They had been on the move for maybe 10 minutes as Gwen turned to him. We should find some place to have a chat, she said. Despite her round and non-athletic appearance, she was not in the least out of breath. They sat, chapter 15, page 111. They sat in a quiet corner of an all-night cafe. Gwen had explained that she chose the place specifically for not having a metal detector at the entrance. The interior was a pleasant atmospheric red, and the lighting subtle, or so Ian at least thought a normal person would evaluate the place. To him, it was unsure whether anything would be pleasant ever again. However, the coffee was welcome for refreshing his mind and raising his alertness, if for nothing else. While they had jogged away from the scene, he had pondered whether he would have survived if thrust into the same situation again, but this time alone. Probably not. Gwen spoke in a low, unremarkable voice that would blend into the background noise. First of all, you have to understand that what I'm about to tell you may leave you unable to ever function normally again. That sounded like a great start. I believe I'm already in that jam, Ian replied. As far as he was concerned, nothing had been normal ever since the first hallucination or flashback. Paranoia, possible false memories, a symbol that caused extreme nausea, skill of handling firearms that should not have been there. All those were far from normal. As Ian considered further, he came to the conclusion that the abnormal things had started even earlier. Why, for example, the strong desire to infiltrate the Axis industrial block. The Axis industrial block. A normal BOFH or PFY would have made a counter-attack through the network. He had wanted to test his physical stealth skills. There was no other explanation. Learning to be a systems administrator from zero so quickly, or learning the cyber priest songs at an unusually fast pace, could be taken as abnormal signs as well. Something was definitely not right with him. He just hoped Gwen would shed some light on that, no matter what the consequences. Let's start with simple things first. What happened tonight? That was an attempt on our lives by Scepter. Though he understood they sat here to discuss utterly, deathly serious things, Ian could not help a slight grin as Gwen recited the letters. Obviously an acronym, one by one. Was that not the organization James Bond fought against? So, Scepter. It's probably not their actual name, but we nevertheless call them by that title. Sectarian, chosen, elite, privileged to rule and exterminate. A ruthless secret organization. One word caught Ian's attention. Hooey. But then he focused on the acronym again. And the impression it made on him. The ruthless elite who wielded a scepter of power, killing people as they saw fit. Ruthless elite. Though he was not completely sure of the connection, the symbol in the documents, the sphere inside the circle, inside the pyramid, probably represented the organization. Symbol in the documents, the sphere inside the circle, inside the pyramid. Did they kill Lucas too? He asked. I found some documents from his place. Gwen remained silent and took a sip of her coffee. Ian thought this to mean that the question was too obvious to be answered. Too obvious, okay. Or then the nod of her head as she leaned forward to drink was the yes. Now that you know who we're dealing with, we can move on to the not so simple things, she continued. But remember my warning. Ian was puzzled. He had almost been shot today. How could mere words be as harmful, or even more? You are a survivor of Scepter's assassin training program. A survivor. You never finished the training. You were extracted before that. The words took some seconds to sink in fully. When they did, Ian felt as if the floor had been the floor had been pulled from under him. The symbol returned to haunt him. The cafe spun and wobbled before his eyes, and he thought he would black out. There was a feeling of constriction in his throat, and blood rushed in his ears like a waterfall. He felt like he was going to be very sick, to vomit right in his coffee cup. It was the truth he had, in a way, expected all along, but still Nothing in the world could have prepared him to actually hear it. The confirmation of his worst nightmares and the most extreme conspiracy theories. He had been trained to kill, then made to forget about his training. There was no doubt that the training had happened during the period he remembered as being incarcerated in the juvenile facility. But had there been more? Which part of his life was real and which was not? Ian wanted to sink through the floor, to simply cease to exist. He hated Scepter from the bottom of his heart. For if a hacker could erase computer records or even destroy hardware with the press of a button, they were doing the same thing with human minds. It was unbelievable, unforgivable. But his hatred was mixed with heavy despair. He knew it was ultimately powerless. What could he or even Gwen with the Desert Eagle do against such force? Such organization had to be vast, probably going all the way to government level or even beyond, pulling strings from behind the scenes. There was no limit for his paranoia. The room still spun around. Gwen had probably been very right when she had said he might not be able to ever function again. But there was one word he latched onto after the most intense shock had faded. Extracted. Who had extracted him? As if sensing the question of Ian's mind, Gwen continued. There exists a rather small group that opposes Scepter. We call ourselves the Agency, or simply Agents. Several years ago, a team raided the training facility you were held in, practically burned it down to the ground. Most of the training subjects died or went missing. They got lost. They got lost in the surrounding woods or attacked the agent team, who were forced to defend themselves. But you were one of the few who were successfully extracted. Ian was not sure whether he should feel lucky or not. There was, of course, the matter of your training, or should I say programming. I don't have the full details. But I understand that a kind of counter-programming was necessary to free you from Scepter's grip. If you've felt irrational effects like hallucinations or nausea when in contact with triggering material, it's because of these two kinds of programming fighting your mind. Okay, I'm going to stop at page 115.